Hello, everyone. I'm excited to welcome you to today's webinar on behalf of our team at Eagle Business Software. My name is Deke Bowman. I'm a solutions consultant on our team. Today, we will be focusing our time on EBMS Server Manager, and tasks most applicable for EBMS admins are those responsible for keeping your systems up to date. But before we get started, a few notes for our time together. At the end of the webinar, we will have a live Q&A. As you have questions, please post those using the chat icon in the toolbar. The chat is private until the moderator posts your questions for everyone to view, so they might not show up in the chat feed immediately. After the webinar, we will send a follow-up email that will have the Q&A summary and a recording for you to review and share with your team. If you experience any technical issues, we encourage you to disconnect and reconnect to the webinar. And if you're still having challenges, let us know in the chat. We'd be glad to assist. So for today's webinar, we'll be using EBMS 8.4, and then I will be using the company dataset, A Cow, Coffee, and Bike. So EBMS Server Manager showed up, was introduced with version 8.1. It's a tool predominantly for EBMS admins. It is a central hub to manage your companies and maintenance your data. So providing utilities and tools to keep you up to date and working in the most current way. And then it's also where all your updates and upgrades are managed and executed. Let's dive into EBMS Server Manager. So we're here in a demo data server, and hopefully this reflects a little bit in some ways how your server looks. You generally would have EBMS logo and start shortcut here, as well as EBMS Server Manager. For some reason those don't show up, just remind you can hit the start menu and simply start typing the application, so in this case, EBMS Server Manager, and that should pop up here. If for some reason that doesn't, just verify you're actually on the server machine, especially if you're using a remote desktop environment, and you're not potentially even searching on the local machine, if that's also the case. Looking at Server Manager, we have two sections. The menu on the left, a series of icons with options, and then your data sets represented through these company tiles on the right. And then down here at the bottom, you have notifications. Anytime you have notifications, be it for updates, upgrades, maybe to restart services, if you've added a data set or you've installed modules, or in this case, to opt in for enhanced support, they will show up here. The great thing about our notifications is that they allow you to take action in that moment. So you just simply hover over the run, in this case, run EBMS upgrade. And if I click that, it would initiate the upgrade. You can also remove the notification message by simply clicking the S, and that conceals them. They will show up the next time you open Server Manager. So just keep that in mind. If you don't resolve what they're notifying you for, each time that you open Server Manager, it will show up again. So we'll just kind of work from top to bottom on the menu. Here, the Add Company button. I suspect most of you won't really have a reason to use this unless you are setting up on a new server, or maybe you've migrated your data to a different hard drive, at which point you would just simply select the folder icon and then navigate to the drive where your data is kept and assign that. There's two places you can do that. Here's the first. And then in the settings button, we'll drop down here, is the second. So similar field, you simply select the folder, find the EBMS root folder where your data is kept, and you can select that. So let's walk through the settings menu. We have a few tabs that give us a few different tools and settings to manage and set up. So here on the first window, I spoke about the folder direction where your EBMS data is stored. We also have these three checkboxes, and these are related to notifications. So I'm going to start at the bottom, and that's send my EBMS server errors. Send my EBMS server errors to administrators. So if you're running my EBMS and you want to receive any error messages, you simply check that box. Any situation where you might want to uncheck that box is if you do not use my EBMS and you do not have a relay key, which I'll explain here in a moment, You might also still receive error messages. So if that's your situation, you're not using MyEBMS and you do receive a MyEBMS server error, you can contact support if you have specific questions, but you can also feel free to uncheck that box. The second one up here from the bottom is send emails to administrators. So this will send any notification emails to the administrator listed in this field down here at the bottom. And then the opt-in for enhanced support. So this is a really important one. This allows us to catalog your error logs in a larger data set with other users or other companies. And by doing that, our dev team can aggregate that data and follow trends and helps them make decisions, sometimes on patches. If they see a certain number of errors, they can troubleshoot and be responsive to that data in real time, as opposed to waiting for support requests to come through. And if you want a more detailed explanation, you just click the explain button and it pops up some details. Down here in the box below, this is where the notifications will be sent to. These are the administrators. So they can have multiple email addresses or just one. And if there are no email address listed here, there will be no emails. You can't send emails to no one. So I encourage you to put, if you're the admin for your company, put your email address in there. If there's more than one of you, you can add a second one just with a semicolon. And then I will add mine so that Joel's not the only one getting bugged with emails from our demo data set. And now both of us will receive emails from it. So just semicolon and the second email address or third, etc. Now, one thing I will mention, it's important to just make sure if you have multiple people receiving these notifications that you clarify maybe within your team who's taking action. It's important to have that clarity so that one, action's taken when it's needed, but also so that you're maybe not doubling up in the response. Let's move to the second tab, the update tab. So this is a really useful tab. And I hope that if you opened up Server Manager on your server, you would see a similar window like this. It's by checking the automatic download updates box, you are creating a scenario where you don't have to come in here and check. You don't have to click the check for updates button every night. Server Manager will download any updates that have been made available for you and automatically bring those onto your server. And at that point, you'll be ready to run your update or upgrade during your maintenance window. If you don't want them automatically updated and this box is checked, simply uncheck it. And whenever you want to check for updates, you can click that button and it will check for updates. Or we'll also maybe send you a notification and there would be a download button available on the menu. I would encourage you to, again, go ahead and set this up so it's automatically downloaded. It's ready for you when you're ready to run your install. I will say this is a first point where I would say that it's important to think about maintenance rhythms and maintenance routines, creating a time when you are regularly updating and upgrading your software. And we'll talk about that process here shortly. The next tab is the maintenance tab. And I will start from blank here, but this is a place where you can run EBMS utilities, but without opening EBMS, and we can set up an automation for that. So you might ask what utilities are running. This is analogous to opening up EBMS, the old utilities or the utilities that are still there, but opening up the utilities menu. You find these utilities here where you would normally run them with an EBMS and you would manually initiate them. All your users would have to be out of EBMS, which is still the case when it's happening on Server Manager. But this allows you now to schedule them. So rather than coming in here as an admin and running these utilities periodically, we can schedule them building a regular maintenance rhythm. So let's go ahead and walk through that process. So I want to create maintenance utilities for my coffee company. So I'm going to add a new maintenance task. That opens up a tile. Now the default for the maintenance task is that it would run at 2 a.m. We set an hour in the middle of the night that one would hope is open and free. Nobody's working on your system at that point, but maybe it is the case. And it runs every day as the default. Does it need to run every day? Not necessarily. It could be run once a week. In fact, often I recommend to clients that it's a good place to start, depending on the size of your company and the number of transactions you're running per day. So let's go ahead and walk through this. If you click the button here, you are given the time options. So you can select a time that makes the most sense for you and your business. We'll click the 2 a.m. That works for me. And then it defaults to every day, but if you click that button, you can now select the day of the week you'd like it to run. So in my case, I'll just have mine run once a week, and I'll click Sunday. Next, you can choose what companies to run it on. So it defaults on all companies, but if you click here, you see the all companies option and all the companies highlighted, or you can select just a single company. So in the case, the coffee company. So we've gone down through that. Now you have the reindex, the run all utilities, or run all utilities except reindex. I would recommend you just run all utilities. It gives you all the benefits and keeps your data clean, organized, and structured, and lets you know if there are any issues with any notifications through the email. So here is the setup for a maintenance utility. So what other things might you want to consider when you're setting this up? It's important to remind you that exclusive access to your data is required. So if we ran this task now, it would give us a notification that it would disconnect all users. Because of that, we also want to make sure we don't have any other competing utilities or services. So those might often include a backup service or a virus protection. So if you have an automated virus protection, which I hope you do, and you have a backup and an automatic virus protection, you want to make sure you know what times of day those are operating on. So if those are happening at night when your business is closed for the day, that's great, makes a lot of sense. Make sure it's not running in conflict with your maintenance utilities when you set them up. And give yourself a little bit of margin, because as your data set grows, the amount of time the utilities take to run might grow a little bit too. The other thing is if you ran it for more than one company, so let's go back here to this setup of running it for all companies. If this was the case, it would run sequentially. So it's going to run CSR, then DEM, then COF. And that's important to keep in mind, because if the utilities take a measured amount of time to run on one company, it will do that for every single company, depending on its size. So you want to make sure you allow enough time for them to run properly and not be interrupted by any other service or be impeded by any other service. So we'll go back and we're going to set this up just for coffee. But I do want to run maintenance utilities on another company, just on a different day. So I can click Add a new maintenance utility, and that adds a second utility, and you can have them set for every day if you would like, numerous. 2 a.m. is still good, but I'm going to run this one on Monday. I'm going to run it for just the CSR company. So now we've set up 2 maintenance utilities to run on 2 companies and sequentially on different days. Again, excellent way of setting up your utilities. Again, you could run them every day, but depending on your other services, the size of your data sets, and your hours of operation, you might want to break that up throughout the week. So we'll move on. Oh, one last thing. You can put an email address in here if there's somebody who would like to receive the email in response to the maintenance utilities separate from the administrator. You can do that here. Moving on to the next tab. Click on the Advanced tab. And most of this stuff here, you don't really need to interact with. It's informative if you're working with maybe a third-party developer. We might ask you to verify a port on the support department if you're calling with a specific issue. But the one area that I will point out is the relay key. So any of you are using my EBMS, my time track, or the API will require a relay key. So if this is blank on your system and you're wanting to use those services, any of those apps, this will be part of installing in the setup. So just keep that in mind. If you currently have my time track or are using my EBMS apps and there's a connection issue, they're not working, hop onto Server Manager, click on the Advanced tab under the Settings menu, and make sure you have a relay key. And if you don't, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll help you get one of those and install it. Finally, we have the About tab, which just gives us a little information about the tool, and that covers the settings menu. All right, working down our menu screen, we have the Codebase Administrator. Codebase Administrator is a tool mostly for developers or those who are familiar with Codebase. This isn't even a thing we'll open, but just to say that it's there, and it is useful for developers or maybe the support staff if they're helping you service a bug or some other issue. Next, we'll have the services menu options. So there might be an instance where you need to restart services or simply start services. And this is where you would go to do that. If maybe a support person says, have you tried restarting services? You would come here and you would do that here. So if they are just like a music player or VCR or DVD player, you have a play, you have a stop, and then here's our restart button. So if you need to restart services, you can simply click that button and it will cycle through and disconnect, stop services, and restart them. If you needed to stop services for some reason, you hit the stop button. Or if for some reason your services had stopped, you can hit the play button. And services are several different functions that help maintain the connectivity between your workstations and the server for data sets, connectivity with the web services for apps, and other security measures. You can also see the individual services running for each company by clicking the Services Health menu. And that will bring up all of the different services, and notice you'll see the company ID here throughout all the services. So what do we use this for? Well, and there might be some instances where somebody in the support team might ask you to reset a specific service for a company. So let's say maybe you're having an issue with time track at the coffee shop. So you could reset all of services and that might resolve the problem, but we might start with something a little bit less invasive and restart services for just the time track app on that company. And this gives us the ability to do that without restarting the services for everybody. This is not something I would necessarily go in and poke at just randomly, but our support team might direct you or give you instructions on how to do that. You can also restart EBMS services in entirety through this button here within the Services Health window. So we'll close that. So again, we have services in entirety here that we start, stop, and restart. We have the Services Health menu, which lets you engage with individual services at the company level. And then next, we have the Troubleshoot Problems button. So the Troubleshoot button is this amazing tool, and you might, if you call with support with some kind of issue, largely maybe a connection issue, you might have them respond with, have you tried hitting the Troubleshoot button? Well, this is what we mean when we say that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop services and demonstrate an area where this might happen and where this might be useful. And notice when I stop services, it gives us a notification to let you know that this will disconnect EBMS users. And it's really important. Anytime you're working with services, be it stopping or restarting, that will be highly disruptive to anybody who's working in EBMS. So make sure you notify your team and let them know that'll be happening so they can save their work and exit before that disruption occurs. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop. And I want to demonstrate a signal of where services might be an issue. So if I go to open up EBMS, notice it says connecting to localhost. So there's essentially a connection issue. I'm going to come back to EBMS Server Manager and I'll hit that Troubleshoot button. It's going to notify me that it's going to disconnect all users. And do I want to continue? In this case, yes. Same rules apply to services. It's reconnecting, restarting services, and running a series of utilities. Once that operation is completed, I open up EBMS, and I'm now able to log in. So the issue is resolved. And likely, what we know in this case, it was simply a connection issue. But whenever that might happen, for any number of reasons, that's a great place to start. And again, that is disruptive. It will restart all services and run through a series of operations to ensure data is shared, installers are shared, etc. All to make sure your system's running, functioning smoothly. So use that. That's a great initial starting point. And again, just be mindful of the disruption that it could cause. Viewing your logs, I'll click that. It opens up a Finder window with all the logs files. This is useful information. You might have, again, a support person who wants a copy of the logs so we can give them to development to assess. This is where we go to find that. If you want to look at your logs, you're welcome to do so. It's important to understand that there isn't always, I would say, it's not always obvious what to look for, but that there is useful information here, and our support and development team are able to use that to help effectively solve some issues that they come across. Next, we have the Run EBMS Upgrade button. So notice when restarting services and running Troubleshoot, that reset server managers or notifications showed up. So the Run EBMS Upgrade button on the notification is the same as running the EBMS Upgrade button here on the menu. So there's two scenarios where you might run an upgrade, and those are a version change or a branch change. And what does that mean? So if you're going from 8.2 to 8.3 or 8.3 to 8.4, that version change is an upgrade. And that requires exclusive access to your data. So it's really important that you set up a time, a rhythm, is how I would recommend approaching that, to run those updates and upgrades. And why do I say that? Because as they come out, it's really, really useful to manage that space and that environment. Users can't be in EBMS when you're running an upgrade. They have to be out. It will prompt you to disconnect that users will be disconnected. And it will be maybe changing data, maybe changing business logic through patches, etc. And you want to make sure that's done free of any conflicts. And in fact, EBMS Server Manager won't let you have those conflicts. There's also updates, and updates are within a version or within a branch, specifically their builds, and those happen fairly regularly. Those might come out every week or two, and they're often small patches or updates correcting a bug maybe, or making some other enhancement on the software. And now the difference with an update is technically users can still be in Eagle Business software. And if that for some reason that's different, Server Manager will let you know and prompt you that they will be disconnected. But I would actually recommend that you run updates the same as you run upgrades. Make sure nobody's in the software. Set that time of day every week where you run updates and upgrades. And if you don't have them, you get that time back for yourself, but you're building that regular routine where you're able to do that outside of normal business hours and create a maintenance window. Some reasons why I recommend doing that is that allows you to manage unexpected outcomes. So what might happen during an upgrade that could cause a problem? Maybe a drive failure, maybe a power outage, and maybe even there's a bug or an error in the installer. Doesn't happen very often, but if it did, you would want to respond to that actively. You'd want to know about it, and you wouldn't want to disrupt your business operations as a result, right? So by setting up a maintenance window outside of business operations and a rhythm of doing that, again, every week, every couple of weeks, you're able to manage that intentionally and respond to it. That's also why we only download, set an automated download for the software as opposed to an automated update, because we want to make sure that you have control and you're managing that process within your company. So these are the menu options that you'll commonly find here on the side of Server Manager. Next, let's look at the company tiles and some functions that you will likely encounter here and some that are new in version 8.3. So we'll look at the Cow Coffee Company here, and you see we'll just start at the top and work our way down. First, you'll see the COF, and the COF is the company ID. And what that does, or what that's used for, is identifying which company you're using on your maintenance utilities. You make that selection not by the company name, but the company ID. For those of you who are using the API, you will have to use the company ID when hosting or getting data from your data set. It's how the API knows which data set to access. It is also editable. So if for some reason, maybe you're restoring a backup, or you just want to change it for some reason, you can do that by simply clicking in here and renaming it. So I could change this to CFE, and that would update that. It does prompt you to restart services because we're making a change. I'm going to actually change it back to COF because I like the COF, but it is possible. And again, a scenario where I might do that is if I've built some automations using a tool like Power Automate with the API, rather than going in and changing all my automations, if I'm restoring a backup, I might change the backup company data set to reflect the company ID of that I had already set up with those automations. Now, it is important to note that you can't have two duplicate company IDs within a server manager. So if you try and do that, so for example, I come in here on this other coffee and bike and I use COF and tab, it will throw an error saying I can't have duplicate, I do have to have a unique ID, and it will restore it to its previous form. That's a company ID. You have your company name. Then going down, we'll come back to the yellow buttons here in a moment. You have the file path for your data set, which is clickable. If I click that, it will open up File Explorer with the company data. You might see your support representative or solutions person or dev person do this if they're doing some work on your server, access and assess maybe a question they have in your data. And this is also a great way you can follow this back out and maybe access other data sets or look at your documents or other folders. So again, this is where this data set is kept, and also a great way to keep organized. If you had a few data sets, if maybe you had some backups here, and you wanted to make sure you're looking at the right folder, that's a great way to do that. Next, we have the version. So here you see 235023. Now I do know it's running 8.4, and we can see that simply by opening EBMS. You see the version here at the bottom. Also, if we logged in and opened EBMS, you'd see the version here, as many of you know. So what is 235? 235 is the branch of the software, which also is tied to a version, but that's important to know. So if you're getting an upgrade and the branch is new, so it's going from 235 to 236, or maybe 233 to 236, which some of you might be experiencing, that is an upgrade. And again, upgrades require exclusive access to data. It is oftentimes a version change, and you would want to do that, especially that would be required to do outside probably of business hours. You don't want to do that when you're disrupting, where you could disrupt business, and that's perfect case for that maintenance window. Then there's 023, and that is your build number. And again, those are put out fairly regularly. Those include bug fixes, patches, or enhancements to the software within a branch. And those often do not require, or as a general rule, does not require exclusive data access. However, again, I would recommend treating them just like an upgrade and fit that into a regular maintenance routine. Next, you have active users, and this is useful maybe if you're coming in here to run an upgrade or update, and you want to find out are people in the software. Make sure people are out, giving people time. Maybe you're coming in at the end of the workday to start that, or maybe you need to run the utilities manually and you want to make sure people are out. So notice it says active users is 0, but I'll go ahead and log into the software. I'll minimize EBMS and we'll refresh, and you can refresh by hitting F5. And now notice it shows an active user of 1. So because I'm in the software, it shows up. Now if I close EBMS, and again, click back in here to Server Manager and refresh, and now active users go to 0. So just a simple way to know, it isn't going to change in the moment as people log in or log off. It's a snapshot at the moment when you open. So if you want to check, just refresh, or if you've done a walkabout your office to make sure everybody's out and you see people logging off, when you get back to the server, just refresh that just to make sure you have a valid amount. The next tool, which I think is kind of useful, I say kind of because it's a unique case in which you might use it, but pretty powerful. There might be scenarios where you have different company data sets for different locations, let's say. Or maybe you have a company data set that management uses for the larger holding company, and you have different data sets for the sub-companies. But you want to make sure that people don't accidentally log into the wrong company data set. And you might define that by the location or the type of company. You can actually group companies and limit their access at a location with a few settings. So let me show you how that works. I'm going to click company group and type in coffee. And I'm going to hit save. So now this is grouped in coffee. So I'm going to actually uninclude this data set. So we only have one coffee company showing. And I'm going to open up EBMS. I'm going to hit the drop down. And notice we only have best hardware, or quality hardware, and best team. We no longer have coffee. I've excluded it. I've grouped it on its own. Question is, how do you access that? I'm going to click the server button. And in clicking the server button, you see localhost. So that's the server name. In this case, it will be whatever your server's name is, or it might also say localhost. Now I'm going to put coffee at localhost and click OK. Now it's going to update that, and notice that a cow coffee shows up. So it's a simple way to limit the access of some data sets or providing access to specific data sets. You might also do this if you're a new implementation client and you've been doing some training or work in the sandbox and you have a machine set up for that specifically. You could limit access to just the sandbox and use that just for training. And you simply do that, maybe create a training group. Probably a few different scenarios where this might be valuable. We'll leave it to you to decide how best to maybe utilize this tool. And if you have more questions, feel free to ask in the chat or reach out to support. So I'm going to remove this group. And when I delete it and click save, it goes back into the general list and will show up on the drop-down menu. Now, one of the last elements of the company tile are these three checkboxes. You have the include, the enable external services, and the SQL Mirror. So if you want to add a company, so I disabled a company by unchecking that box. We're going to add a company back into it. We click include. Now let me open up the data in File Explorer so you can see we have 4 data sets here and only 3 are active. So that would reflect any change here. So if I click include, it now activates it. So I have all 4 data sets. You'll be prompted to restart EBMS services. Ensures connectivity, especially if you're enabling external services, it provides access to that and you need to restart services to prompt that. Enable external services. That checkbox is to allow access through tools like MyTime, MyBMS apps, TimeTrack, etc. So it's simple as how it's explained. It's enables that connection to the outside tools. And then those of you who have SQL Mirror, we have the SQL Mirror checkbox, and that appears when you have the SQL Mirror module. So that's the fundamental information and interaction on this tile. But there's 2 buttons you see left, the Add Modules and the Update button. So after you've downloaded your upgrade or update, you've installed the updated or upgraded software, nothing's changed on the data. So you want to make sure you update your data, and you'll be prompted to do so upon the completion of the upgrade or update. And there's a wizard that goes through that. So you can do it at that point, but maybe you've added data later. Let's say you've restored a backup, or you had a sandbox that you had disabled and you're re-enabling it and you need to update. When you include it, it will pop up this yellow box that says update and allows you to do that. So you simply click that. The other way that you might be prompted to update a data set outside of the installation process is by logging in. So if I logged into this specific data set, it would prompt me to update. So you can do that in that way as well. That brings me to the next button, which is the Add Modules button. And there's a couple steps that I would recommend doing prior to even clicking that button. And this would apply also to upgrades and updates. So the first thing I want to do before I upgrade my software or add modules is create a backup in that moment. So I'll open File Explorer, and we're going to add modules to coffee. Before I do that, I'm just going to hit Control C, Control V, or you can use Edit Copy and Edit Paste, or right click. And we're just making a quick snapshot copy of that data. And for me, to keep myself organized, I often try and add a date. So I'll do an underscore and then the date. Just again, keeping myself organized, trying to keep my data clean. And now I have that backup. And why do I do that? Well, you just never know. I've never encountered a situation where I need to enable my backup after an add module. That just doesn't happen very often. And I honestly, it's a very rare occurrence where I'm going to my backup and to restore it after an install or upgrade. However, if I did need that and I don't have it, that's where problems arise. So it's a great recommendation and a useful practice to first back up your data. And back up at the moment, right before you run your add module or you run your update or upgrade, so that you have it as close to that moment as possible. So even if you have an automated backup service that's happening, by doing it right at that moment, you know you have the most current data. And then you simply click the Add Module button. So I'll go ahead and click that and show you how that works. It sometimes takes a little bit of time to actually add modules, so we're not going to install that, but you'll get a list of modules available to you. And sometimes it takes a moment to load. This is actually pretty quick today, but give it a moment. If the Add Module button's there and this window opens, it will populate a list. It might be just a one or two, or it might be several, depending on your subscription and what's been released to you. You can select all, but in all honesty, I recommend selecting the modules you're seeking to install. So the scenario where I find this most common is somebody in support or solutions that sends you an email informing you that a module has been released by your account manager, giving you and notifying you that an update has been sent. You install your update. It adds the module data that you then have to install in your data set. Fantastic. You run your backup and you get here and you realize, oh, wow, there's a few different modules that I have access to. But that person from Eagle Business Software really just named the one, and you're going to be doing training on that maybe afterwards. So I would just install that one module. Now, maybe you see other modules that you've heard about or that you were told about in the past and you just never installed it. You could install those too. But I like to manage one thing at a time, one change at a time. And you just simply select the box of the module or modules that you want to install and click the Add button. And when you do that, it will run through a process and show up with an installer and install those modules. And then it will prompt you to restart EBMS services. So we've made a lot of changes throughout the data sets here. I'll just go ahead and restart EBMS services. And again, a good practice to do, but when you hit that button, it will disconnect all users. So again, beating the drum of the maintenance window or the maintenance routine and having that space earmarked and set aside just for running these kind of maintenance operations. There's a few things I want to mention that might occasionally happen or I have seen happen, and I want to give you some insights on. Sometimes you might get an error when you're opening up EBMS. So you'll come here and you'll open up EBMS. And this error that I'm specifically referencing is it tells you essentially you might have an upgrade, but we don't know. There might be a file missing, and it sounds kind of ominous. Interesting. So I restarted EBMS services. The services were stopped. I opened EBMS at the same time before it finished completion, restarted the services. Services have been restarted. And here we go, it's opening up. So you get to this point, you log in, and it essentially there's an error message that talks about updates, and there's only one option. Click OK. It's not do you want to install or not install. It's just about kind of an unknown and to check with support. So if that happens, one thing I would recommend you doing is coming to File Explorer, coming to EBMS data, or your EBMS folder, I should say. Come to the server folder. and we're going to look at the client installer folder. So the client installer folder is the place where we hold a CD image, the installer tools, for your workstations. And if that folder is empty, the workstations don't know if there's an update, if they're in the right version. And is this a problem? Well, it's not going to break anything. And that's important to know. You're fine, keep working. You can simply just reach out to support and we can give you some steps to fix it. But in this moment, I'll just show you where to look. You're coming here in your server folder and you look at client installer. If this folder was empty, you would get that error message in EBMS. Again, nothing's breaking. You're fine in that way. And we just simply need to repopulate this data. So you can reach out to us at support, or you can add it yourself. I would recommend reaching out to us in support, and we can walk you through the steps to do that. But your last downloaded installer is the one that you last downloaded. So if you've not run it, if you're not current, if you added that to the client installer folder, it would prompt them to update. So you don't want to do that. We'll just help you out in the process. That's the thing to check. Is this full or empty? And that gives you a little bit of data to come to us with support. Also, if that client installer folder is empty and you come to Server Manager and open Server Manager, it will tell you an error. Your client installer folder is empty. Reach out to support. Once you do that, reach out to us and we'll walk you through the steps to correct that problem. And nothing is broken. Nothing's going to be damaged. It is just something we need to do a quick little fix with. That's in the entirety in general of EBMS Server Manager. We've gone through all the tools and utilities. We've talked about some best practices and behaviors and where to find a bunch of information about your company's data and how to set up and maintain your server environment here. I'm going to turn it over to Joel for our question and answer period.
Thank you, Deke. Yeah, so Server Manager is a very powerful tool with a lot of flexibility and a lot of features that will really help you manage your data well. So we have a couple of questions, but if you have more, please feel free to put them into the chat now, and we will ask them. So the first question today, Deke, is so they said, I'm an administrator and I have my email address in the general tab of the settings. Do I need to add myself to the maintenance notifications as well if I want to receive the utility results?
That's a great question. I put myself in both. In general, I don't believe so. In fact, I'll check to make sure. But my habit is to put myself in both in my test environment. So that ensures that that's my practice. But I will get you that information and it will come out in the recap notes.
Great. So another question we had was, what is the difference between the services and the services health and the EBMS services there?
Sure. So services is, looking at the screen, is all services. And there's a few different services that are in play with EBMS. Services health shows you all of the different services for the different company data sets. And what I would say is, you don't necessarily need to worry about this. This is something that you would probably receive direction on from a support person, but this shows data access, scan, time track, update, SparkLink. You see these different services that are going on. There's also a code-based services that are part of the backbone. So these show you the individual parts of the services. This is restarting all of the services. And then again, you have this button to restart all of the services here within the services manager. We can give you detailed descriptions of what the different services are in the notes for after the webinar though.
Great. I also would want to add to that, if you restart just the EBMS services, it does not kick everybody out of EBMS. However, it would disconnect any My EBMS clients, time clock, or my time users. So EBMS Services is a little more flexible during, if you need to restart it for some reason during the day, it's a little more flexible, but it is something you still should be aware of, that there are some of those other services that may get disconnected, but EBMS itself will not go down with the EBMS services. We had a user who he said he missed the first couple of minutes and just wanted to have us go back to, where do we find the Server Manager tool?
Sure. So I'm going to close Server Manager. And it is own independent application on your server. It is here in our case, the installer puts it on the desktop, but if you don't find it on your desktop, I would just go to the start menu and type in EBMS and Server Manager, and it would show up there and launch it from your start menu or the search bar within Windows.
Great.
And one thing I'll point out just real quick, you might notice that those add module buttons didn't show up immediately. Sometimes it takes some time for them to show up as it's launching Server Manager.
That's a great point. We had another question. Why do I get notified there's an update or an upgrade, and do I need to do anything? We are a Plus client.
Great question. So Plus clients, for anybody who on the call who doesn't know, we have a service, our Plus service, where you can have upgrades and updates managed for you. And for those of you who are Plus clients and you're getting that notification, I think what I would just do is I would recommend you have a conversation with your account manager. You could also talk to somebody in support. And if you don't want to know that there's an update available, then we can talk about ways of doing that. But it's informative, and the action you need to take as a Plus client is nothing. You'll likely have a support representative reach out to you to let you know, to verify timing for those tasks that need to be completed.
Great. What is the process to move EBMS data folder to a new folder location?
Okay. So in that context, my assumption is that you are going to be moving your data to another drive. Maybe your data sets are getting large, or you want to just hold them independent of your root software drive. You would move those data sets to the new location, and then come here to your settings menu, and so find that EBMS folder that you've moved all that to, and point it to that spot on the new drive. And then once you've selected that folder, it will update Server Manager and your data sets will appear again.
And this is already most likely the case since you are moving the data, but something to be aware of as well. If you are changing the root level of your EBMS folder there in settings, it will require everybody to be out of EBMS to do that. But if you're already moving your data, they're likely already out, but just something else to be aware of.
Yes, great point, Joel.
We had a question about what is the SQL Mirror option?
Yeah, great. SQL Mirror is a module that we have available for EBMS that allows us to mirror, for lack of a better word, your data to a SQL server. So a SQL Mirror is what it's called. And why would somebody do that? Well, we have tools and features that are external, things like Microsoft Power Automate or other SQL tools that would allow you to access your data. So the most common occurrence for us is clients who want to use something like Power BI to create custom dashboards or reporting tools that allow them to see real-time activity on their data. And SQL Mirror lets us do that. If you do have the API or that entire feature pack, the SQL Server data can also be called through tools like Power Automate. And there's probably a lot of details around that would need to be ironed out. But simply put, SQL Mirror allows you to mirror your EBMS data in a SQL Server, and then empowers you to do all the interesting things that you can do in SQL with your EBMS data.
Great. And it's also very useful if you have to run a large report. If you have the SQL Mirror, I believe it's starting at 8.3, you could specify that you want to pull the data out of the SQL Mirror rather than the EBMS code base, which then takes the workload off of EBMS and the main database. So that way you're not slowing down all the other users while you're running these really large reports. And the speed is much faster than the EBMS database. Another question we have here is, after doing an update or upgrade, is there anything required upon login at each workstation?
Yeah, great question. So you've run your update or your upgrade on the server. What happens at the workstation level? Well, once you've done that, your users at their workstations will be prompted to upgrade at their workstation, because the software is also installed at the workstation. So when they log in, they'll get a notification. Do you want to upgrade or update or run the upgrade or update? Yes or no? Yes would be the ideal answer. It generally doesn't take very long, only a few minutes. The caveat there is they do have to have permissions on their machine to run a software update. So administrator level permissions is often required. So if that isn't the case in your situation, after running your update or upgrade on your server, it would be useful for you to also run the updates or upgrades on the workstation machines as well, which makes it all the more great argument for defining and developing a maintenance window and routine to accomplish those tasks.
Very good. So that is all of the questions that have come in so far. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Dee.
Excellent. Thanks, Joel. All righty. Thank you, Joel. We are glad that you were able to join us today for this session, and I hope that you feel a bit more equipped to use these tools in Server Manager. Upcoming webinars, you can see on the screen. On April 14th, we have our next webinar on tasks and work orders at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. You can also check out our events page, eaglebusinesssoftware.com/events, for details on that and to reserve a spot. You'll also be able to see information about other upcoming webinars as they're scheduled out. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to our support team or your account manager directly, and we'd be happy to help. Thank you for joining us.